returned, and it's an absolute glorious afternoon here, and the days coming are supposed to be just as nice. So you know as school is starting when the good weather returns. My name is Lisa Caulfield, and I'm the director of the Notre Dame Global Center here at Kylemore Abbey in County Galway. And I want to thank you all for joining us on this 4-week journey in which we participated with a variety of guests and a variety of speakers and panelists. It's been a really rewarding time personally for us to collaborate so comprehensively with my sponsors, the Connacht Rugby with Eamonn Molloy and with Justin Hickey, who's the coach at the Notre Dame rugby coach, which has been just a really nice partnership together for the last 4 weeks. And we've been able to do across a lot of subjects and a lot of interesting people along the way. So it was a great honor to work alongside them both. So I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and to know that this is all sitting on the ThinkND platform, in which we have the complete series with all of the resources, and we'll be updating it with some additional resources as we finish up. I would like to also always thank our sponsors that have made the whole book club concept, the global book club concept, a reality. And it really started off with Notre Dame International and the Connacht Institute for Irish Studies. So always a pleasure and honor to work alongside them. The College of Arts and Letters have been a firm supporter, the Keough School of Global Affairs, Notre Dame Learning, and of course, we wouldn't be here without the Notre Dame Alumni Association and the ThinkND platform. As is our tradition, we will be taking questions through the chat function, which Zoe will be sharing with you in this in the chat. So if you can just click on the link, then we'll be moderating the questions through that link. If you just submit the form, and we'll answer it in real time. If for whatever reason we're unable to get to your question in this hour that we have together, then I encourage you to join the ThinkND LinkedIn page and the book club page that we have for this series, in which we've managed to maintain community and continue to suggest books through that platform, and also ideas and thoughts and engagement. So I encourage you to become a follower of the ThinkND book club if we don't get to your question. And also, if you have any suggestions for future book club ideas, we're always welcome to hear from our audience. At the end of the hour, we will have an 8 to 10 minute breakout session in which you'll have the opportunity to meet your other participants in the book club, and just to have a bit of discussion of what we discussed today and what you felt was impactful from what you saw on the videos and what you heard in today's discussion with our panelists. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our two panelists that will be discussing the diaspora of rugby, and also the mental wellness and health that's affiliated with the game, and how we can continue this very important discussion. Our first guest is Karl Borel, and Karl is the current Director of Development at the Connacht Rugby, where he has been since 2015. He first joined as Head of Operations and then Director of Development role, which he got in 2019. Prior to joining Connacht Rugby from 2010 to 2015, Karl worked as the Chief Executive Officer for Mountaineering Ireland, which is the national governing body for mountaineering, where he developed and implemented significant operational plans. Karl served more than 12 years with the Defence Forces, and his experiences include service with the United Nations in Liberia and with the European Union Force in Bosnia. Boyle is a graduate of commerce from NUI Galway and has a master's in business administration from Dublin City University. He is a native of Kylemore and a former Mayo inter-county footballer, and captained successful teams at both underage and senior level for Kylemore's GAA club. He also played rugby at underage level for Newbridge Rugby Football Club, and Karl has been a key architect in the development of Connacht's new stadium, which involves significant collaboration with the Irish government and the diaspora to secure funding. Karl, you're warmly welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here. I'm really delighted to join your book club.
Thank you, Karl. And our other special guest today is Hannah McCormack. Hannah is the campaign manager for Tackle Your Feelings, a mental well-being campaign. She is responsible for the strategic development, project management, and content creation, as well as the practical delivery of phase 2 of Tackle Your Feelings across the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. This phase of the campaign builds on the past success of Tackle Your Feelings and embarks on a more focused approach to both corporate well-being and the mental well-being of secondary school students throughout the 4 provinces of Ireland. Hannah has completed the Irish Institute of Sport Applied Mentorship Program. She consults with athletes and teams across a range of sports, including rugby, athletes and referees, but she also has experience with swimming, canoe, polo, archery, and triathlons. She has recently completed the Women in Sport Leadership Program, which was run by Swim Ireland in association with Sport Ireland. And Hannah's going to start off our discussion today with a brief presentation about the work that she does with this organization entitled Tackle Your Feelings. So Hannah, you're very warmly welcome as well to today's session.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to go straight into it because I know I'm going to try and keep my presentation as brief as possible. So instead of me talking all the time, I'm going to ask you a question first off, guys. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer. It's just more for you to hold in your heads. And I'm going to ask you, members of the alumni and friends of Notre Dame, what is mental health? When I say the words mental health to you, what are the things that you think of? What do you picture in your mind? What are the connotations that these words come with? And I will come back to that in a moment. So I actually work for Rugby Players Ireland, who are the representative body for all elite level rugby players in the whole country. We help develop, and we help engage all of the players from Connacht, from Ulster, Leinster, Munster, the women's 15s, and the men and women's 7s team as well. And as part of the kind of, I suppose, program or the supports that we give the players, we have the player development program. So this is just a really quick slide, just kind of tells you really quickly what the player development program is. So we look at helping players become the best version of themselves. We look at developing them off the pitch. One of the main themes or one of the main aims of Rugby Players Ireland is to make Ireland one of the best places in the world to play rugby. So there's things like career advice and guidance, education, training and skills, social engagement, financial planning and financial management and planning, and obviously the player well-being, which is where Tackle Your Feelings comes into it. So then to answer the question, what is actually Tackle Your Feelings? Tackle Your Feelings is a positive mental well-being campaign, and we want to encourage people to be proactive when it comes to their mental health. We see well-being as being the balance between the challenges that you face and the resources that you have to deal with those challenges. The more resources you have, the better your feelings of well-being, and the better your feelings of well-being, the more able you are to deal with those challenges. And I'll go into that a little bit later. And what Tackle Your Feelings does is it enables people to build their own mental well-being resources. We specifically provide tools for people so that when you finish listening to me today, you can actually go away and download an absolutely free app that gives a lot of resources that will help you help you build and maintain your own positive mental well-being resources. How we are linked to Rugby Players Ireland is we utilize a lot of our players to help us bring the messages to the public. We know that when we have people in all of these kind of like really exciting roles of being an elite athlete, they're able to act as role models to the general public to help them see how they can be proactive themselves. We want to help break down the stigma around mental health and well-being. We want people to be proactive. Like I said, we also provide the tools and exercises so that you, the individual, can actually take control and work towards building, maintaining your own resources. And then we want to encourage people to help us spread those messages. And that's where we get a lot of our players involved, a lot of our members. So from the Connacht rugby team, we've had a great ambassador in Jack Carty. And we've also had Finlay Beelum, we've had Dylan Tierney. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with them, but they've been some great advocates for the work that we're doing in Tackle Your Feelings. So then to come back to the question that I asked you, what is mental health? A lot of the time when you talk about mental health, or traditionally, or definitely in the past few years, the view on it has changed. But in the past, when we considered mental health, a lot of people would immediately think of mental illness, or they might think that is something that doesn't belong to them. It's something that doesn't necessarily concern them. But through Tackle Your Feelings, what we want to get across is that your mental health is actually your feelings, thoughts, your emotions, and your mood. It's something that we all have, and it's something that can definitely 100% change on a daily basis. It can change on a weekly basis, a monthly basis. I think we can all attest to the fact that our mental health has been impacted in the last year or so. If we compare our mental health now to how it was maybe 18 months ago, there's probably some differences there. And these differences are very normal, and these differences are nothing to be afraid of. Life is about kind of experiencing these changes and being able to manage these changes. The other thing to be very conscious and aware of is that how we experience a certain situation, how our mental health is impacted, or how our mental health is right now, isn't necessarily going to be the same as someone else. So even though sometimes situations can impact our mental health, just because someone is in the same situation as us doesn't mean their mental health is going to be impacted in the same way. The feelings we experience, the thoughts we have, the emotions and the mood, they're going to be different. And guaranteed, of all the people who are on the panel with me, we're all in a similar situation. We're all remotely dialing into this call right now. You guys are all sitting in as well. But my kind of feelings, my thoughts, what the emotions I'm feeling and the mood I'm in right now is probably going to be different to yours, even though we're in a similar situation. So that's just to kind of give an example of how the differences are normal and the changes are also normal. So that's the mental health side of things. We are a positive mental well-being campaign. So like I said, the definition before that I gave you, which was that we see well-being as being the balance or the equilibrium between the challenges that you face and the resources that you have to deal with those challenges. So you can see that challenges are written here in this diagram in a big down arrow. And that's because when we experience challenges, it's going to have a negative impact on our perceived well-being. It's going to make us feel low. It's going to make us feel down. It's going to sap us potentially of some energy. I have a non-conclusive list of what some of those challenges might be in the top left-hand corner. You can see obviously COVID is at the top. It's probably one of the biggest challenges we've ever had to face and hopefully will ever have to face in our lifetime. Something like, I call it a big change. So Lisa informed me that some of you dialing into the call may be retired. That's a challenge in itself. Going from regular working life into retirement is a challenge that people experience. Work stresses are challenges, the relationships that you have with people. Grief is a huge change in people's lives and can have a massive impact on their well-being. Money problems are something that people will sometimes go through, sometimes not. At one stage in our lives or another, we've probably experienced money problems, and even just having a negative mindset. These are all challenges. These are all things that are going to contribute to that negative impact on our mental health and well-being. Now, if you look over to the right-hand side of the diagram, you'll see that resources is actually written in a big up arrow. And that's because when we have resources, it's going to boost our perceptions of positive mental well-being. It's going to help us feel better. What it's going to do is when we are facing challenges, it's going to rebalance or bring us back to that level of equilibrium because we'll be able to use the resources that we have to help us deal with those challenges. Now, that's not to say that resources are only beneficial when you are facing a challenge. When you are going through what is known as like a good period in your life or a good life, resources are going to help make you the best version of yourself. They're going to help boost that perception of mental well-being. They're going to enable you to live your best life. And you can see again, I have a non-conclusive list. These are just some of the things that we highlight as resources that are going to contribute to your positive mental well-being and help you deal with those challenges. So things like confidence, optimism, self-care, support networks, relationships, and the big R word, resilience. So all of these things are going to be really beneficial, and they're all things that, regardless of your stage in life, regardless of whether you're a professional athlete, a recreational athlete, or just even a fan of sport, having these kind of having these resources are just going to help, and working on your positive mental well-being is going to help you just, again, like I said, achieve that kind of feeling of goodness, that feeling of I'm living my best life. And when we don't necessarily deal with, or when we are facing with a lot of those challenges, we can become quite overwhelmed, and that's what happens to our well-being. Like I said, we've been through an incredibly challenging time over the last 18 months, so chances are our well-being has been negatively impacted. And it's by using resources like the ones that I listed earlier that can help us kind of, I suppose, deal with just that unrest and that kind of feeling of being untethered that we have undoubtedly been experiencing over the last couple of months or even a year or so. So in terms of Tackle Your Feelings itself, what we have, like I said, the second aim of the campaign is to encourage people, or to provide people with the tools and exercises that they can proactively work on their own mental health and well-being. And we do this in a couple of ways. We have a bespoke TOIF app. Like I said, it's absolutely free. So I would obviously encourage everybody to download it. You can also have a look at our website, and then you can also watch some of our ambassador videos. So we have some of Ireland's leading rugby players kind of talking about their own experiences. That there is a cartoon version of Eamonn Considine, who plays for the women's 15s. But like I said, Jack Carty from Connacht also gave his experiences of dealing with was actually a troll on social media, and how that had an impact on his well-being, and that had an impact on how he was able to play the game, and how he dealt with that, and how he continues to deal with those kind of comments as well. So that's how we kind of provide those tools. In terms of Tackle Your Feelings itself, we have an umbrella campaign, which, like I said, is for absolutely everybody. And then what we do, because Tackle Your Feelings isn't just for one group or another, we have Tackle Your Feelings Pro, which is specifically designed for our pro members. It includes areas that deal with challenges that are specific to the game of rugby. So dealing with injuries, contract negotiation, obviously, if you're a professional, transitioning in and out of the sport, or even to different teams. And also the idea of just having hobbies and downtime, and actually a little bit of time management. So all of that is in our kind of pro section. We have a sport, Tackle Your Feelings Sport, which is in development, and we're hoping to bring that to our non-elite players or rugby players or any other sport that might be interested. We also have Tackle Your Feelings Work, where we come into workplaces and do workshops which talk about, again, getting people to be proactive with their positive mental well-being, and also just recognizing the signs of stress and being overwhelmed, which, again, a lot of people have been experiencing lately. And then we also have Tackle Your Feelings Schools, which is a bespoke schools program aimed at secondary school students. And that was actually relaunched today by two of our other ambassadors, James Lowe, who plays for Leinster, so I know rival team, and then Ciara Griffin, who's the captain of the women's team. And they were there supporting us today in terms of our launch and just kind of explaining what it is. So as you can see, like I said, this is something that we bring to absolutely everyone. Everyone is going to benefit from being proactive with their mental health and well-being. And an analogy that I give, and I give it to the players because I think it seems to land a little bit more, is that the fastest players on the pitch will still do the sprint drills. So your wingers, your fullbacks, your centres, they don't sit to the side while everyone else is going through speed drills. They will still, even though they're the fastest, they will still always want to improve on their speed. They'll always look for those 1% gains. So you can view Tackle Your Feelings as you working on your mental health skills, on your mental well-being skills, to make those 1% gains to, again, be the best version of yourself. And like I said, I'll just put this up and then I'll finish my presentation, that this is the Tackle Your Feelings app that you can download for absolutely free on both Android or Apple. And I will leave my little presentation there and we can move on to the next part of this evening's session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. And I must say, it's Dr. Hannah McCormick, and we spoke yesterday, Hannah and I was telling her that we're very excited that we're having our students arrive. So our Notre Dame cohort of students are arriving to Galway after a year of being on hiatus because of the pandemic. So Zoe and myself will be welcoming 10 young women who have decided to come to Galway and spend the semester with us. And Hannah's going to have a chat with them. So thank you, Hannah, for agreeing to be on today's panel, but also for coming willing to speak to our students. I might bring in Eamonn here, and just Eamonn to talk a bit about how Tackle Your Feelings intersects with you, and how you've worked with Tackle Your Feelings in Connacht Rugby, and what it's been like to work with such an organization. Before we move on to Karl.
I suppose, yeah, my connection with it would probably be the closest connection I have would be with some of the younger players. And we'd have a psychotherapist who works with our younger players here, Aidan O'Flynn. And I suppose, again, to echo Hannah's sentiments, it's just getting another edge, another component of your performance. And having Aidan, who's our I suppose, performance coach or mental skills coach there with the team, and we also have Jack Birthwhistle as well with the seniors, just gives them somewhere to go, gives them somewhere to discuss those aspects of their mental feelings, and gives them opportunities to compartmentalize it. And I remember, I suppose without breaking confidence, with a young player a number of years back who broke into the Connacht team, and he broke into the Irish team the same year. He just, went on a whirlwind rise. But at the time, his father was terminally ill with cancer. And that was a hugely challenging period for him, in the sense of he was trying to perform on a number of levels in professional sport. And obviously, trying to continue to rise and keep those gains, while he had all this going on in his own personal life. And I know that at that time, he used someone like Aidan quite extensively, certainly weekly, if not even daily at times, just to be able to compartmentalize those things and be able to bounce somebody to bounce those thoughts off, and be able to deal with the emotions he's dealing with, be able to, understand the emotions he's dealing with, but also, as I said, be able to compartmentalize that. Put it to one side, deal with what he's dealing with on the pitch, or perform on the pitch, and then deal with the other side. And the season that he had was actually incredibly successful, and you probably couldn't put that down to many other things. He would have been an elite performer in any case, but the fact that he remained consistent, remained on the rise, and his career continued to rise. You could only put down, and overcoming, obviously, the tragic loss eventually of his father as well. You could only put that down to him really managing his mental side very well.
One follow-up question to you too, Eamonn, and from Justin's interview with Potter too, it seems that rugby in particular, although it was nice to hear from Hannah that it's across all sports and it's across all sort of genres, including work and school, that this particular charity works towards helping young people. But it seems to me that in particular to rugby, there is this sort of scaffolding, a sort of help that's built into the sport that really kind of mentors and that there's sort of resources for rugby players to have. I know from the interview with Potter Timmins, he had this, sort of person to go to when he was even making the application to go to Notre Dame. What is it about sort of rugby that that professionalizes their players in such a way that they have this immense sort of support network? How is it that it's evolved so strategically?
I think evolved is probably the correct way of putting it. So I think rugby as a professional game is still relatively infant enough. It's 25 years old as a professional game. So, in days gone by, people had their careers, they had their friendships, they had all those supports. I think in that evolution you mentioned, what we've noticed is that people are throwing themselves at rugby. The players going into academies, they're hedging all their bets on rugby, as they do in many professions or many sports. But there's a handful of players maybe in Ireland that could actually retire on what they earn in rugby. So at some point there is a transition there. That transition could happen early with a player coming out of an academy in Padder's case, or it could happen later where a player in their 30s has played their career, you know, has been earning a significant amount of money, but at the same time now they haven't built up a career. So the next step is at the very least a big step downwards for them in the sense of their earnings and the beginnings of their career. So I think it has evolved in that sense, that, you know, the professional game started off probably with people balancing a bit of work and a bit of rugby, you know, and then it became players who, you know, were nearly dropping out of college because to pursue their dream of playing rugby. And it was probably at that point that the IRFU and Rugby Players Ireland both came in on it and realized, well, you know, that defeats the purpose if our players need to drop out of college and drop out of careers in order to become rugby players, because that life is only going to last, you know, 5-10 years max.
Well, you segued nicely into the IRFU there, so we'll bring Karl in and now ask Karl about the work that he does and what gets you up in the morning about the work that you do, and why do you do it?
Yeah, Lisa, I suppose that's it's a great question, because you know, if I think about that deeply, I suppose I'd start with my DNA in many respects. I suppose one of the things that we forget at times is that the county boundaries were something that evolved in Ireland after the Anglo-Norman conquests. And, you know, if you look back beyond that, it was the Connacht and the others, the provinces of Ireland that were I suppose they were the ancient territorial entities. And so that starting point of, you know, it's in our DNA, the provincial, the Cuaga. So I think that's the first thing that connects me with Connacht. I suppose that sense of identity, that sense of place, that sense of a broad community that is the 5 counties of Connacht. So I'd say that's the first thing. I think beyond that as well, you know, there's something bigger than sport, much bigger than sport. And I suppose if you look back to 2003 and you know, I know you've covered some of this before, but in 2003, Connacht Rugby the lights were nearly turned out at that time. And the saving of Connacht Rugby became very quickly not about rugby at all. It became about the west of Ireland. And really that struggle at the time, which incorporated a march to Dublin, and at this stage, I think everyone from the west of Ireland was on that march. But it really was a broad church of people that gathered to save Connacht Rugby back in 2003. There were people from the world of politics, from business, from entertainment. Literally everyone got behind the cause, because the cause wasn't simply about a rugby team. It was about a part of the world, the west of Ireland. And, you know, Connacht from that point on, I think really embodied what the west of Ireland is. So it's that sense of purpose really that gets me up in the morning, I suppose, and that is really connects me with what I do. And I suppose if I'd add to that, I'd say that maybe role models as well would be the other one. You know, I was fortunate growing up that we had a hero in Kieran Fitzgerald, the national captain of Ireland, of the Irish rugby team in the 80s. And he was a heroic figure in my eyes. You know, he was born in Loughrea in County Galway, but was a huge being when you'd see him on TV and at a match. And, you know, he went on to captain the British and Irish Lions on their tour in 1983 as well, won a couple of triple crowns with Ireland. But he was also in the Irish Defence Forces. And he was a young officer in the Irish Defence Forces at the time, and that led me in many ways to on my career path of firstly joining the Irish Defence Forces, and you know, it was with that in mind, I suppose it connected me again through Kieran and his travels back into the world of rugby when it came knocking later on in maybe 6-7 years ago now at this stage when I joined Connacht Rugby.
I suppose, Karl, you alluded to there just the nearly uprising in the community behind Connacht in 2003. How do you feel as an organisation Connacht have gone on and capitalised on that broader community beyond the rugby supporters, and not pay them back, but really engage that broader community?
Yeah, well, I think after that time, there was some interesting straplines that Connacht developed to really connect with the broader community. One of them was Front Up, Rise Up, and it was that kind of sense of action, of getting behind your team, and really, as the numbers supporting Connacht grew and grew and grew. But it's fair to say that really we didn't fully, and rugby has been evolving right around the world since those days in the 90s of professionalism. But, it probably took us till the post 2011-12 era, once we got that first taste of being at the top table of European rugby, to really start commercializing the brand of Connacht Rugby, which is now the largest brand in the west of Ireland. But it probably took to that era before we really got a handle of what our business model was as well, because there's the business behind it all that has to support the growth of participation, the education of coaches and volunteers, and also obviously professional coaches and players as well. So I think it was once we realized what our business model was, and critically identifying the unique points of difference between us and others, I think it was at that stage that we really started to understand how we needed to operate as a hugely ambitious club on the fringes of Europe. And with those challenges, maybe in terms of economic and everything else, how do we overcome them? And really it was to use the phrase in Irish rugby of the team of us. It was about getting everyone behind that team. I mentioned in 2003 as literally Connacht became the embodiment of the west of Ireland. Well, then from 2011-12 onwards, what really happened was you saw a real uprising in terms of an affection for Connacht Rugby, but also then in terms of some of the performances that started to come through. Like I mentioned, that first year in at the top tier of European rugby, and there were some big wins. There was beating Toulouse, the kings of Europe over in France, which was a really important moment because it was with very young players, many of them homegrown young players that became role models themselves. The head coach at the time was Eric Elwood, a former Irish international from Merview in the city of Galway. And, his passion, his sense of resilience, his pride, and the emotion and the openness with which he displayed all of that was infectious. People just jumped aboard. And then you started to see exciting talent, the likes of Jack Carthy come through, Robbie Henshaw come through, Dave Heffernan from Ballina, County Mayo, players from right around the province starting to break through. And really, that's what teams need and their fans need. They need to see absolute relevance. And without a shadow of a doubt, that relevance just grew and grew and grew. And I suppose it was a two-way street. Connacht Rugby can't be successful without the support of its fans and indeed its diaspora. And it's with that the success is mutually inclusive. Our purpose to inspire our community through rugby success is all about, how we go about our business and how we perform on the pitch and indeed off the pitch will inspire others. And it's not simply about inspiring them because of for rugby experience or for rugby successes. It's to really make people believe in the west of Ireland that they can achieve whatever it is they want in whatever area of life they wish. I think as a parent with young children, I reflect a lot on, the west of Ireland of old, that really its biggest export has been its people. And while that's been wonderful for places right around this globe, and the success stories of so many right around this globe, what I want to see for my children is a west of Ireland that can sustain them, but not just sustain them, that they can realize their potential and maximize their abilities in the west of Ireland. And yes, they'll see the world, but I want a west of Ireland that will attract people to it and also retain that talent so that the future just is, it's a virtuous cycle of success.
I suppose you mentioned there that the export of people, and what's kind of stemmed from that is many of the population of the West of Ireland aren't in the West of Ireland, or many of the fans of Connacht aren't in Connacht, and that has led you to reaching out to, we call it broad community, but it's global community, and particularly the US. I know you're part of a group that took a team to Boston and marched in the St. Patrick's Day parade there. Literally the week before COVID, we were due to send a team to New York to do the same. So could you tell us a little bit about that engagement and how it's been received?
Yeah, and again, I think there's a number of different elements to it. One is that, there's the more we engage with and connect with people who have, of the West of Ireland, abroad, and the more invitations, the more that those connections lead on to others as well, which are hugely important for us and in terms of our development. And we've been able to take teams. We took our academy side, our Eagles, to Boston 2 years ago in 2019, and that was a wonderful connection with the Boston Irish community. We met with the mayor, who's gone on to greater things since as well, Mayor Walsh, whose roots are in the West of Ireland, and we had a couple of great games with the emerging New England Free Jacks, which are part of Major League Rugby. And again in 2020, until COVID hit, we were about to bring our under 17s to play New York, rugby in New York, and again, there's strong Irish links with those teams as well. Not just in terms of players that have had the opportunity after coming out of the likes of the Connacht Academy to taste an experience in the US, but also you're seeing some of the owners, Bill Webb in Toronto, James Kennedy in New York, and others that have been really driving investment into the game of rugby there as well. But also we believe it's a two-way street. We believe that there are opportunities for us to invite coaches back to Ireland and have great experience and really develop their ability and their ambitions as coaches as well. And I know you had Coma Gandhi on recently as well, and I met her, a friend of mine in New York, John Greeley. He introduced me to Coma a couple of years ago, and on the back of that, she came over to Ireland to embed herself with our pro coaching team and to really get a first-hand experience of how a team is developed and indeed how you maximize performance as well. So those types of connections are wonderful. And indeed, we've got a number of patrons as well that are supporting some of our activities. And that's a program that we're growing, and it's wonderful to connect with people that can really see an impact from contributions they make to Connacht Rugby as well.
I'll just throw one more question now. I'm conscious I'm hogging it, but the more you talk, the more questions are coming to my mind. Just wondering, from your opinion and from the discussions you've had with the diaspora, what is it about sport that connects people to ancestral homes? Or, you'd have many people who'd connect with Connacht, you'd have many people who'd always travel home for an All-Ireland. Again, I'm sure with the US alumni, I'm sure many of them connect and go to the football games when they come around every year. That's your connection back to the university. What is it about sport that's the root of that connection, or that keeps that tie?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a meeting I had with a great Roscommon man in New York, and he talked about when he looks back home and he sees young men and indeed young women playing for Connacht and indeed going on to play for Ireland. He just thinks about the wonderful role models that they are for the next generation to come, and indeed for adults and everyone else as well. And the inspiration that they bring is something that's uplifting, and it was the way he put it. And I think that's really important, that sport transcends so many things. We've talked about with Willie Anderson and recently about partition and those types of things. And one thing that certainly sport does is it includes, it brings people together, it brings communities together. And the wonderful thing about sports is that, yes, you've got the people that are playing it that can be of one age. You can have the coaches of another age, the volunteers behind them, and the fans as well. It incorporates everyone. And, you know, my next door neighbor here, he's 80 years plus. And every time I drive in the gateway, he practically hops over the wall to come over and to get the latest update, to hear about, you know, what player is doing well in training. And, you know, usually I don't have the answer for him, but we have great chats, and then the games come, and, you know, he might never get to be in the stadium, but he'll watch every one of those games on TV. He'll absorb them. He'll have a million questions. He'll have lived and died through that 80 minutes of rugby, and he'll have something hugely valuable to him for the next week to talk about the successes on the pitch as well. So I think it's all those things. It's the emotion, it's the pride, it's the excitement. It's all those things that connect people really, really closely to sport.
Karl, I wonder if you could. Sorry, I had questions that came through to me in the chat. Just a bit about, like, can you explain the structure of the IRFU and how it connects into the provinces, and just give our audience a sort of kind of contextualization of what the IRFU does and how it works dynamically with the provinces? And could you give it just a sense of it? Yeah,
indeed. So the Irish rugby is obviously we've the Irish national teams, both senior men's and women's, and indeed our 7 sides and age grade sides as well. And they select from the 4 corners of Ireland the best players to obviously put on those jerseys. But Irish rugby is a significant brand in itself. It supports the 4 branches, the 4 provinces, in order to have successful professional sides, and really equally important, maybe actually more important, it supports the provinces to have very strong participation programs, so that all the clubs, all the schools that engage with the sport have quality coaching, have great supports for volunteers, have pathways for their players, and indeed develop the plans for those local and regional clubs as well. So that's really important. It also acts as a negotiator in chief in many cases in terms of TV rights deals and other commercial programs as well. And it's really been a leading light, I suppose, in terms of sports governance in Ireland as well over the years. And, you know, developing the national stadium as well, and the Aviva Stadium was a huge achievement back in the late 2006, 2009 or so. So really, it's kind of like it's the peak for a player to go on and represent their nation. But in terms of the body as the governing body, it really is driving the standards and the energy around the entire island of Ireland. Then the provinces, and in Connacht's case, so going back to that Cuaige Connacht, we have responsibility for rugby within the 5 counties of Connacht, and that's everything from minis rugby, from a 4 or 5 year olds starting to pick up that ball, all the way through to adult leagues and competitions. And then also our academy and professional side. So the provinces, the 4 provinces, would have lots of similarities, but yet we certainly would have significant differences. Some of those differences are go back to what I said about our business model and how we adapted to be able to compete at the highest levels against all the odds in many respects.
Thanks, Karl. I had another question come in for Hannah, actually, about sort of like mental health and mental wellness is actually quite a prominent, I think, theme at the moment for a lot of our young people, especially for our students and for players. Can you talk a little bit more about the program that you know, when you go into an actual school or club or team, how do you work with them, and how do you equip them? Understood that it's through the positive sort of reinforcement, but what are sort of the skill sets that you're trying to impose or create, and considering that it is such a centrally, mental well-being and health is taken on a really important, I think, kind of psychological place in our heads at the moment. So just to give us a bit more context of how you equip your people you work with.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things we do is again, and one of the main aims of the program is to kind of get rid of the stigma around mental health and well-being. So, and that's why I kind of asked that question at the start of my little presentation of what mental health means or what kind of thoughts and connotations mental health brings for people. Because we want to kind of dispel the myth that mental health is mental illness, and that mental health is something that isn't necessarily for everyone. Everyone in the world has mental health. And the thing is that your mental health can be good, or it can be bad, or it can be somewhere in between. A lot of views is that it's somewhere on like a spectrum of poor mental health, which is where you can experience mental illness, and then really good, positive mental health. And the truth of the matter is that the majority of people will exist somewhere in the middle for the majority of their lives. And we very much take on the kind of positive psychology stance that being here is okay, being in the middle is okay, and being okay is okay. And it's a very Irish thing to say that everything is grand. And that there's nothing wrong with that. But why do we want to stay there? Why can we not bring people to be great? Or why can you not be having a wonderful day instead of just a grand day? So it's kind of dispelling the myth of, like I said, that mental health equals mental illness, or it's something to be overly cautious about, or overly kind of even afraid of. We try to encourage people to see that you can then have an impact on your mental health in the same way that you can have an impact on your physical health, and that we should really be viewing our mental health in the same way we view our physical health. And there's lots and lots and lots of information out there, and we probably all know this information about our physical health, how we can improve our physical health, even if it is just walking that extra bus stop, like getting off the bus an extra stop away from where you're meant to be, and taking those extra steps, taking the stairs in work, eating a little bit healthier, getting regular exercise, maybe not smoking or drinking as much. All of these things, I'm sure as I'm saying them, are kind of ringing a bell to everyone. But the same kind of messages aren't there yet in terms of our mental health. But the truth of the matter is that we can still have that positive impact on our mental health. And so that's what we want. That's the kind of the first lesson that we try to bring to people, is that it's all these differences and all of this influence is okay and it's normal. Then we try to encourage people to become more aware of their emotions and their feelings. And we had, like I said, two of our ambassadors kind of helping us launch the schools program today, and kind of talking about, I think we can all kind of bring ourselves back to when we were like maybe 16, 17, or even 18. And some of the big emotions that we experienced were very scary, whether it was, and not even just negative emotions, but even kind of like the joy and the happiness. Like I remember being a teenager and thinking that in order to be a teenager, I had to be one of those sullen people kind of sulking in my bedroom, like not talking to anyone and listening to dark music, and almost feeling guilty in a way for being really happy and laughing, which is, and when you think about it, it's like slightly ridiculous in a way. So it's about encouraging people to experience that full range of emotions. And we talk about resilient people, and resilience has this, again, this kind of air of, if you're a resilient person, nothing bothers you. If you're a resilient person, you can get through the toughest of times. But the truth of the matter is that the most resilient people out there will allow themselves to experience that full range of emotion. So they'll allow themselves to be angry, they'll allow themselves to be sad. We know from like research that is out there, or even just kind of literature that's out there, that if it wasn't for some of these so-called negative emotions, a lot of really good things in life wouldn't have happened. So if we didn't experience anger, then, the civil rights movement in America wouldn't have happened. If we didn't experience that kind of frustration and unfairness, things like the Eighth Amendment and the marriage equality referendum wouldn't have happened here in Ireland. So it's because people were angry and feeling that there is like a level of unjustness that some positive things happen. So we need those quote unquote negative emotions to just progress in life. And so that's what we also try to get people to see, is that the full range of emotions is, again, a really normal thing to experience. And instead of trying to push negative emotions down and try to pretend that everything is okay, that it's actually okay to have non-okay days. It's okay to have sad days. It's okay to have days where you're stressed out. And again, I think we've all experienced that over the last 18 months or so, where we haven't had the energy to do things that we used to do quite easily. Maybe even some of the things that used to bring us a bit of joy just weren't hitting the mark anymore. Or, you know, we have some beautiful weather at the moment, and all through lockdown in Ireland and the various lockdowns in Ireland, we've had pockets of good weather, which we're very fortunate to have. But I'm sure there were days where a lot of people just didn't feel like going outside, or didn't feel like being that kind of really active, go happy-go-lucky person. And again, it's about kind of just allowing yourself to experience that, allowing yourself to feel those things, because they are very, very normal things to experience, especially considering we're going through such a challenging time. Everything that has happened over the last 18 months has taken a lot more consideration. And I'm sure Karl and Eamonn will attest to the fact that the players in Connacht have been really, I suppose, fortunate. Sport came back quite quickly after the first lockdown, and the environment that the players went back into was very, very different. All of a sudden, you now have to take, in Connacht, you have to take regular PCR tests. You have to potentially sanitize. You have to, you're put into pods, so you don't necessarily get to mix with the same people or the whole team. All of these things are all contributing to like that mental load that we generally have anyway, but it's like our mental load has been so much higher over the last couple of months. So again, it's telling people, making them aware that this is what's happening and that it can have a negative impact on you. And when it does have a negative impact on you, that's a very normal reaction, and that there are very tangible things that you can do to help you recover or deal with those challenges. So something as simple as, and I'm sure a lot of people may have heard of this, is the idea of practicing gratitude. So looking at the things that you are grateful for, that are going well for you in your life, because we have a very good habit, especially in Ireland, of dismissing some of the good things that happen to us. Again, the key phrase there is everything is grand. So you may have just won the lotto and somebody will be like, oh, how do you feel about it? And you'll be like, oh yeah, sure, it's grand. I don't know if anyone was watching the coverage of the Olympics recently, and we had two of our rowers like made history and won the first gold medal from the rowing regatta in the Olympics. And one of the rowers, Paula Donovan, actually said, oh yeah, sure, it's not too bad, like referring to winning a gold medal. And like, it's funny because we can all relate to it. But the truth of the matter is, and I will say that as Americans, you are much better at embracing the good things in life than we are over here in Ireland. So we're actually trying to encourage people to embrace the positives, to be grateful for the things that they have, and even to savor the good days that they have as well, because we know that this is going to contribute to positive mental well-being. There's so much research out there that shows that practicing gratitude, that practicing savoring, it contributes to feeling happy. It contributes to your resilience. It contributes to your optimism. It can even contribute to decreasing instances of depression. It can help you cope with negative experiences. So all of these things that are really simple to do, as long as you do them, are going to contribute to your positive mental well-being. And then another lesson that we try and get, and especially with our professional players, is the idea of not just time management, not just kind of figuring out how much of your life you should be dedicating to rugby, but that in your downtime, that you should have a hobby. And it's kind of an interesting thing, because when you look at athletes, whether it's college level athletes or elite level athletes, they are technically, for a lot of people, living the dream. They are playing their hobby for at a level. They're training day in and day out. They are getting paid to play a sport, which for a lot of people is, like I said, just living a dream. But it's really important. A lot of the general public will see sport as their way to disconnect from work. They will see sport as a way to relax after a hard week at work, they'll turn on the match. When Connacht are playing on a Friday night, it's a great way to wind down after a stressful week. But our players where is their outlet, and how can they potentially get away from the work that they're doing or the thing that they're doing on a day in, day out basis, and actually recover and actually have that downtime and actually relax? And that's something that we are really trying to encourage through Tackle Your Feelings, is the idea that you need to pursue something for the pure joy of pursuing it. We also know that has a huge impact, a huge positive impact on your well-being, is pursuing something that you are taking part in the activity just because you really enjoy taking part in that activity. When it becomes your profession, you don't always pursue rugby for the joy of play. Like, there is a lot of joy that comes out of rugby. There's a lot of joy in playing the game. There's a lot of joy in training and doing a lot of things to improve yourself, but there's a lot of pressure on it. So we know from a well-being perspective that having a hobby, having something that you do just for fun, because as we get older, as we become kind of more adult, or like when we go through our adolescence and we become adults, we stop playing, which I think, anyone who has young kids, and Karl, your youngest child just started school today, I'm sure if you watched what they did in school today, a lot of it was play. A lot of it was fun. A lot of it was kind of doing something new and exciting. And you have to kind of ask yourself, when was the last time you did that? When was the last time that you turned to your family and said, you can go away now because I'm going to go in here and explore something brand new and have like a really good day? And I don't know how they reported back how their first day of school went, but I'm guessing it was pretty well if they were telling you to leave first thing in the morning. So, and the question is, like, as adults, when's the last time we did that? When is the last time, like I said, we did something for the pure joy of doing it? And these are the messages, and these are the lessons that we're trying to get in at the secondary school level. So kids who are maybe age 14 plus, and, at the academy level in the provinces. So like the guys who are just out of school and getting into the rugby before they kind of, I suppose, launch into their full rugby career. And even obviously the members of the old guard who are going through it. And obviously the people who are potentially having to transition out of the game, and asking them, well, you're going to have more free time now. That's what happens when you retire. What are you going to fill your day with that is going to be enjoyable? And a lot of people can't answer that question. So these are the things that we want people to kind of build the skills around when they're younger, so that whatever life throws at them, because those challenges that I highlighted earlier, they are unfortunately something that is out of our control, and they are somewhat inevitable. Everyone is going to experience a big change in their life. Everyone is unfortunately going to experience a level of grief. We're going to experience some sort of relationship challenge, or a change in the relationships that we have. How can we best equip people to deal with those challenges when they happen? We're not going to eliminate those challenges. We're not going to pretend that if you work on your positive mental well-being, those challenges won't exist. It's more, how do we give people the best tools so that when someone really close to us passes away, that you're able to get through that situation, that it's not going to impact you in a devastating way. So that's, I hope, answers the question of what the lessons and what kind of tools we hope to provide for people.
Well, Hannah, I think there was a great image that was coming out of the Olympics with the British swimmer who was knitting.
Yes.
So his fun activity was to knit in between his. I think he was a diver. So and it also creates zen too, I guess, and calmed him too.
Yeah, and that's what they say. Like, anything that you can do for the pure enjoyment of doing it, anything that's going to help you get into almost that flow state of, and we've all done that, and a lot of people find it through sport, which is amazing. So everything just kind of happens naturally, and you don't realize the time is going by. And I'm sure Eamonn and Karl and Justin, you've all experienced that on the pitch at some stage, where every ball you touch, just you manage to pass it, you manage to kick it, you manage to land it just perfectly with zero effort. So it's kind of like trying to encourage people to find that flow for themselves in other pursuits, whether it is sport or whether it's knitting or crocheting or music or art or anything like that.
Lisa, just one other question for Karl, if I may. I'm conscious kind of we're coming to the close of it, and it's a 4-part series. So I suppose the first episode we were talking about Connacht and the history and nearly pulling itself up to get equality with the other provinces, and probably really kind of dispelled those shackles. Karl, now having won the Pro 12 as it was at the time, and you would have been part of the announcement of the new stadium, and even at that, people would have been kind of thinking, "Geez, is this real or isn't it? Can this happen?" So, I suppose, what's next for Connacht? What does the future hold?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, I think there's two things. There's the on-field targets and the off-field ones. And on-field, we've been really clear about what our expectations are, that we qualify for top tier of European Championship rugby every year. That's the baseline for us. And we've been achieving that year on year. Also about qualifying in the championship and what's now the United Rugby Championship, qualifying for playoffs, and that's critical that we're in there in the mix at the business end of the season to compete for trophies, and to get that winning taste. And 2016 we won our first championship, and that was brilliant. We defeated Leinster over in Glasgow in the championship final, and it was an amazing occasion. And it's really, when you look at the connection to the community right across the west of Ireland, bonfires burned that weekend after winning that trophy. And I think, it was an amazing experience flying that trophy back into Knock Airport, Ireland West Airport. The airport's sitting at the heart of the province, and bringing it and landing there in 1 or 2 in the morning, and thousands of people to be there to welcome us. It really has the taste of for more success in our mouths. I suppose off-field, as you say, yeah, huge plans in terms of our ambitions, and that will be realised in terms of fit for purpose stadium and high performance centre. They're on track to commence phase 1 next summer. And it's really interesting, again, the alignment there between what we're trying to do and regional policy. There's an Ireland 2040 plan, which is trying to address the imbalances of economic investment and really see new hope, new vitality, more jobs, infrastructure, strong sustainable communities across the west of Ireland. And our project, the stadium and high performance centre, has been described as a beacon for regional development. It's really shining a light on the west of Ireland, and really that, it's about everyone being ambitious. It's about, Connacht Rugby maybe leading the way, but everyone else is to follow, and to have that sense of ambition right around the province, and that, there's always more to come, and there's always dreams to be realised.
Well, with that, I have to say that's a great way to conclude our series, with dreams to be realised. Thank you, Karl. And I want to thank you all again for joining us today and for your participation over the last 4 weeks. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation, the resources, and the discussions that we've been having with our panelists and guests who've all contributed to this topic this month. I really wanted to reiterate my sincerest thanks to Eamonn Molloy of Connacht Rugby, and of course to Justin Hickey of Notre Dame Rugby, who did the interviews with Pater Timmins for this week's session. A really interesting interview for a young man who was in college here and went to Notre Dame to pursue his education career. And then also for Marie Doyle, a former Notre Dame Galway student for us. She spent the semester with us before she was, before she graduated, and then also her, writing about her experience, who also contributed to the session this week. And then just again, to extend a warm and thank you to Karl and to Hannah for this evening's presentation, and for your generous comments and your engagement with us. Really enjoyed the conversation and thought it was a stellar conclusion to our programming for this entire series. And I can't leave without thanking Zoe, who's like the Wizard of Oz behind all of the tech stuff. Thank you, Zoe, for helping with all of the recordings and putting everything up on line. We're going to conclude then with I think it's small enough that we may just even split into two, Zoe, I think, if that's the case. And if Karl and Hannah, you don't mind sticking on, we'll do a small group session now to have a just chat amongst ourselves. But again, thank you to all for joining us this afternoon. And Zoe, if you can pair us off or group us off.